So today we will move out of the period that we call the early 20th century more into the mid 20th century. And it is during the middle part of the 20th century that we experience what is the seminal event of World War II. It didn't necessarily change things that happened in the past, but it impacted the present like nothing else had ever done. And it impacted our future like really like no things had ever done. Out of World War II comes what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. And you start looking at people who fought during World War II, who were alive during that time period. And Brokaw may very well be right. They may be the greatest generation of Americans that have ever existed. It's from that group of people that all those technological advances that we made in the 1960s and the 1970s came. It's because of that group of people that America goes to the moon. Men walk on the moon in 1969. And so this is, it's a big event. And if you had to choose one event that impacted the rest of the 20th century, and in some ways still impacts our world today, it would have to be World War I. And we're not going to spend an awful lot of time here because we can't. We just don't have time to do it. When you study history, you'll get more of it. When you study world history, you'll get more of it too. So let's take my meager efforts and do the best we can with it, okay? Sound like a plan? What do you notice about the picture behind me? They're all women, okay? What are they wearing?
Skirts.
They're wearing skirts, clothes. What kind of skirts and clothes? They're wearing military uniform. But wait a minute, Colonel Seagraves. I didn't know women could serve in the military during World War II. Is that what you're thinking? Well, nurses, but are nurses really a part of the military?
No.
They actually are. I was setting somebody up with that question. Both the Army and the Navy had basically what was a group of volunteer women whose function was to take jobs that men had traditionally done in the military so that they could go and fight. They could become part of the fighting force, or they could be moved into another role that women could not fill. And so you have a lot of what were called WAVs. That's the Navy part. WAVS, Women's Auxiliary Volunteer Service. And then WACS, WACS, which was the Army side of things. And so the picture is of a group of waves. Where was that picture taken, do you think? Outside. Did somebody just say outside?
In Germany.
No, not Germany. Those are Americans. Here's an American flag right here. It was taken in Georgia. No. Taken about 100 yards from here. Close. What would be about 100 yards from here? That way. Davenport Field. Because Georgia State College for Women, which is now Georgia College, was a WAVE school. There were 4 in the country where women who had volunteered for the Navy were sent to be trained to do whatever job they were going to do. And one of those schools was at Georgia College. You can thank Richard B. Russell. You can thank Carl Vinson for that because it brought a lot of money. In about 18 months, The Wave School at Georgia College graduated about 45,000 women to serve in the Navy in the Women's Auxiliary Volunteer Service. And part of their service or part of their training involved some of the same things that you guys do, that drill and ceremony part of stuff. So, just an interesting picture, I think. They're hard to find, too. I had to look for that one. All right. So, just like there were several causes for the Civil War, there were several causes for World War I, there were also several causes, or are several causes, for World War II. And most of it had to do with politics and economics. Political conditions in Europe, the economic conditions in Europe, and really throughout the world lead directly to World War II. And so cause number one may be a surprise, but it is the Treaty of Versailles itself. If you remember, the Treaty of Versailles ends World War I, and the treaty is so harsh on the Germans and the German people, or Germany and the German people, that it becomes one of the reasons that World War II breaks out. It becomes one of the reasons that Adolf Hitler becomes obsessed with taking over the world, because he felt like nobody could treat Germany like the Germans could treat Germany. And he may have been right. But Germany, Hitler in particular, the Nazi Party in particular, blames Western Europe, Great Britain, France, and the United States. Even though the United States doesn't sign the Treaty of Versailles, they get blamed for Germany's problems, Germany's hardships. And there's a certain ethnic group in Europe, in Germany, that gets blamed. Who were they? The Jews. And the Jewish race becomes a scapegoat. Vocabulary word, right? What's it mean?
A traitor.
No.
Like
Someone who takes the blame. And it's actually a word that originates in the Hebrew language. And basically, something like this. In the Jewish religion, there's a day called the Day of Atonement. And on that day, sacrifices are made. The Holy of Holies, or the priest goes into the Holy of Holies. He makes sacrifice, sprinkles blood all over everything, because it required a blood sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin. Yeah, animal blood. Typically goat or lamb, not a cow. And then the high priest would take a young goat to one of the city gates, and he would symbolically place the sins of the nation of Israel on that goat, and then drive him out into the wilderness. And that's where the term scapegoat comes from. That goat took on the sins of the nation of Israel, was driven out of society, and really took the blame for the people's sin. And so for Hitler, the Jews become a scapegoat, somebody he can blame. Krishna Patel, do y'all know Krishna? Okay, when he was in the 8th grade, I do too. When he was in the 8th grade, I had like he and Shriyant and Adi and and I had like 5 Patels in one class. And, a bunch of other kids, of course. And anytime something went wrong, they would blame Krishna. And so Krishna became their scapegoat. Anytime something went wrong in class, it's Krishna's fault. It's exactly what Hitler does in Germany. And the German people let him do it. Don't ever think that the people of Germany didn't know what was going on with the Jewish race. They knew exactly what was going on. And they allowed it. So, the Treaty of Versailles, of course, ends World War I. It's signed in the summer of 1919. Gentlemen, y'all can leave or you can stop trying to hold hands in class. And that's on film, by the way. In fact, that camera is pointed directly at you. So, Treaty of Versailles goes into effect in January of 1920. And again, it is very harsh when it comes to the German people. The head of the French military, Ferdinand Foch, said this. This is not peace. He's talking about the Treaty of Versailles. He says, this is not peace. It is an armistice for 20 years. An armistice, just, we're not going to shoot at one another. It's a ceasefire. And so Foch says, this is not peace. It's not going to last. 20 years from now, we'll be doing the same thing. And how many years did it take? World War I begins September 1st, 1939. It takes exactly 20 years, almost to the date. 1920, 1919 to 1939, that's 20 years, right? Do what?
That's not what they said in Anne Frank. The Diary of Anne.
What did they say about what in the Diary of Anne Frank? Yeah, well, she did hide, but yeah, she did get caught. Foch is saying that the Treaty of Versailles is not going to do what we want it to do because of its harshness. It's not going to create peace. It's just going to create a ceasefire for a period of 20 years. And it did. And then World War I begins. Yes.
It's crazy. She just said, wasn't that the Holocaust? They're literally the same thing.
What?
The Holocaust is like, because of World War II.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the Holocaust is Hitler's attempt to rid the world of the Jewish people.
Which, like, they all connect together.
Mm-hmm. They do. And then political cartoon. Reparations, $55 billion laid on the German people. The New York World says, let's see you collect it. And to their credit, do the German people pay off the reparations? They do, eventually. Took them a while. All right, so the Treaty of Versailles, this document ends World War I, actually becomes a cause of World War II because of its harshness. Because Hitler places the blame on Britain, France, and the United States. And the German people believe him. Again, the German people allow Adolf Hitler to take them places they probably did not want to go. All right. So number two are some economic factors. Really, there's one economic factor, and that's the Great Depression. So the Great Depression itself is a cause of World War II. Because you have this low unemployment. You have this, or high unemployment, low economic activity all across the world. Germany in particular. Germany's currency during the Depression was worth nothing. I mean absolutely nothing. You ever heard the expression, it's not worth the paper it's printed on? That was true of the German Deutschmark during the Depression. It literally was not worth the paper that it was printed on. And so people used it to line their bird cages, wipe their tushy, start fires. Well, they used that currency, but and this is an exaggeration, but let's say, you can go in the store today and buy Sharpie for $1.49. all right, in Germany during that time, that prices were so inflated that might cost you, just to make it easy, 149 instead of 149. Does that make sense? And so, there's not a lot of buying and selling going on. Here's an interesting thing, and it kind of helps us understand how things get tangled up and how events and people are all intertwined. The Great Depression ended because of what? No, it did not end because of the New Deal. Not World War I. It ended because of World War II. But what was one of the reasons that World War II started?
The Great Depression.
The Great Depression. So can you see, that's just kind of weird.
So
It ends, World War II ends something, but what it ends is actually one of the reasons it even began. Okay? All right. And then third, nationalism. And I hope you noticed something. When we talked about the Civil War, we talked about sectionalism and nationalism, right? Nationalism, putting the nation first. Sectionalism, putting your state or your section first. We talked about World War I. What was one of the causes of World War I? Intense nationalism. And so 20 years after the end of World War I, we see these governments that are focused on nationalism. And we use the term extreme nationalism. What does extreme mean?
Like really big.
Yeah, really big. You're absolutely right. If I'm marketing a piece of sour candy, all right, I might start out, my marketing first year, we say intense flavor, all right? But then I decide I want to come out with a new candy, but I'm really not going to come out with a new candy. It's the same old thing, the same old formula. I just change one adjective. And instead of intense, I make it extreme. It just sounds worse or better, depending on your perspective, I guess. So extreme nationalism leads to a political philosophy called fascism. And we'll talk about fascism in just a second. In two countries, Italy and Germany. We all know who the leader of Germany is during this time. Adolf Hitler. Who was the leader of Italy at the time? We'll come back to that. So, in Italy and Germany, we have two men that come to power. And they come to power because, just like Roosevelt, they promised to bring their people out of the Great Depression. They give their people one thing. Starts with an H, ends with an E. What is it?
Honor.
No, that ends with an R.
Wait,
Starts with an H. Hope, right? What did the American people need?
Hope.
They needed some hope. What did the people of Germany and Italy need? The same thing. And these two men step into the void and they give their people hope because they promised to end the Depression. And just like Roosevelt, do they?
But they do.
They do, but how do they do it?
They start something else.
And what do they start?
World War II.
World War II. Okay? All right. So in Germany, we have Adolf Hitler, right? In Italy, we have a man named Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini. Japan. We haven't mentioned Japan until just now. Japan is not a dictatorship. Japan is a monarchy. They have an emperor. And his name is Emperor Hirohito. But they also have a prime minister. He does the political side of things. His name is Hideki Tojo. So we've got Emperor Hirohito. Hideki Tojo is the prime minister. And what makes Japan different is that they don't have to create a government that controls the people. They already have one. What they begin to do, though, is to colonize Asia. They go into China. You know how big Japan is? It's tiny. You know how big China is? Huge. You know the difference in the number of people? Oh my gosh. But yet Japan invades China and actually beats China. Why? Because they want natural resources. And so Japan's not turning to fascism, they're turning to colonialism, which really has a lot to do with nationalism. We're better than you. We're so much better than you. We're going to come in, we're going to take control of your country. Because we're so much better than you. In fact, we're so much better than you, we're just going to get rid of you. Yes. We'll use your babies for bayonet practice. We'll throw them in the air and see if we can catch them with the bayonet. Isn't that terrible? That's awful. Now, the big difference between Japan, Italy, and Germany is that Emperor Hirohito is not only the leader of the country, he is the God of the people of Japan. Now, what would you think this evening as if you went home, turned on the news, and Joe Biden is on the news and he has raised his hands and he has said, "I am now God, worship me." We'd take him to the loony bin, wouldn't we? But in Japan, that's exactly what's going on. All right. I will be there with bells on.